Since Trump's victory in the presidential election this year, a lot has been made of what his next administration will actually do, not least about how he will act in relation to the UK. Questions have been raised, some of them right here on this channel, about how Trump's next presidency will affect things like a UK-US trade deal and the working relationship between the US and UK government. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how his administration might affect something else: the UK's deal with Mauritius over the Chagos Islands. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Now, before going through exactly what Trump might do, we first need to understand the history of the Chagos Islands, and why the UK recently agreed to hand back sovereignty to Mauritius. Now, the Chagos Islands are, unsurprisingly, a group of islands and atolls in the Indian Ocean. For most of history, the Chagos Islands were uninhabited. The first known settlement came in 1793, when the French established a copra plantation. It's important to note here that they did this using slave labour. Anyway, in the end, the French actually only administered the territory for just over 20 years, as in 1814, France signed the Treaty of Paris, ending the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. As part of the treaty, they agreed to cede Mauritius and all of its dependencies, which included the Chagos Islands, to the British. The next big development occurred in 1964, when the US asked the UK if they could build a military base on the main island in Chagos, Diego Garcia. The issue was that the Chagos Islands were administered as a dependency of Mauritius. Now, back in 1960, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution calling for decolonisation across the world, and as such, the UK had to start making plans for Mauritian independence. So, in order to get around this, in 1965, the UK government bought the Chagos Islands from Mauritius via the Lancaster House Agreement, and created the British Indian Ocean Territory, or BIOT. The Chagos Islands would be part of this, effectively legally separating it from Mauritius. This meant that Mauritius could become independent, and the US could build a military base on Diego Garcia. A year later, in 1966, the US did just this, with them signing a 70-year lease from the UK on Diego Garcia. In return, the UK got a significant discount on Polaris missiles. Following this lease signing in 1973, the UK, with the support of the US, deported the Chagosians and then built a naval base on Diego Garcia. Now, it was in the 1980s that Mauritius started to argue that the UK and US had acted improperly. They challenged the UK sovereignty claims, arguing specifically that Mauritius sold the islands under duress, and that the separation of Mauritius and the Chagos Islands was illegal under international law. As recently as 2019, the UN General Assembly claimed that the UK had acted unlawfully, with them giving the UK 6 months to remove its colonial administrations from the area. The UK dismissed this. In an attempt to resolve this, the UK Conservative government began negotiating with Mauritius, which initially stalled and were only actually picked back up again under the Labour government this year. Reportedly, Prime Minister Keir Starmer was under pressure from Joe Biden to finalise some kind of deal with Mauritius over the Chagos Islands, with some insiders suggesting that Labour refusing to come to a deal would jeopardise the special relationship. Essentially, the Americans worried that had the UK not come to some kind of deal, then they could lose control of their military base on Diego Garcia. As such, the UK signed a deal with Mauritius, which would see Mauritius take back control of all of the Chagos Islands except for Diego Garcia, which would be leased to the UK and US for 99 years, for an undisclosed sum, allowing the US to continue their military activities. While the exact details of the deal are not yet known, the Telegraph has claimed that there is a clause in the deal that will protect against Chinese influence in the islands without the agreement of the UK and US. So, with the US military base on Diego Garcia protected, why wouldn't Trump be happy with the deal? Well, there was already frustration about the deal prior to Trump's election. Immediately after the deal was agreed to, a number of senior Republicans argued against it. Idaho Senator James Risch, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and a Donald Trump supporter, argued that it allowed for Chinese lawfare and yields to pressure from unaccountable international institutions like the International Court of Justice. Similarly, Senator Marco Rubio, the soon-to-be Secretary of State, argued that the deal was concerning, as it would provide an opportunity for Communist China to gain valuable intelligence on our naval support facility in Mauritius. So these are a few different reasons why Republicans oppose it, but they mainly boil down to not wanting international institutions to tell the US what to do, a fear that China will benefit from the deal through some kind of military deal with Mauritius, and a fear that adversaries will soon be able to spy on the US's military base. These concerns seem to be shared by Nigel Farage, a noted Trump ally. It was reported that he's been trying to persuade Trump to veto Starmer's Chagos Islands bid. Reportedly, Farage has sent legal advice, which has been drawn up by experts that worked alongside Farage in the Brexit campaign, to Trump's team. Farage is hoping that the legal advice, alongside the arguments made by Republicans, will push Trump into blocking the Chagos deal, ultimately protecting the US military base on Chagos without having to worry about what Mauritius will do next. Now, Trump could do this in 3 different ways. The first is simply refusing to give US approval to the deal, provided that the exact wording of the deal allows for this. Right now, we don't actually know how the deal is worded and whether this is a possibility. Provided it is, though, this would probably be the simplest way for Trump to shut it down. The second way the deal could be blocked is by simply pressuring the UK into dropping the deal with Mauritius. There'll be many opportunities for collaboration over the next 4 years between the UK and the US, and Trump could always imply that he could torpedo any such cooperation if Starmer doesn't drop the deal. This would be brazen, and a clear hit to the so-called special relationship, though. The third way is to support a plan reportedly being concocted by a group of lords in the UK, led by Lord Bellingham. In essence, they're planning on introducing an amendment to the treaty when it passes through the House of Lords, which would require Chagosians in the UK to vote on the deal before it passes. Now, this would either delay the deal, providing more time for Trump to block it, or could virtually end the deal altogether if Chagosians vote no. The question ultimately, though, is whether Trump would actually want to pursue any of this. Ultimately, only time will tell. Now, obviously, all of that is pretty complicated, but hopefully our analysis has made it a little clearer. Making videos like this requires a lot of effort and research to uncover what's really going on, before then summarising it into something that makes sense to everyone. But that's an expensive process. Running TLDR this year has cost just under £800,000, which, when your main product is free YouTube videos, is quite a lot of money. If you want to support our journalism in 2025, then one way to do so is picking up a copy of our magazine, Too Long. That's because buying Too Long doesn't just get you a high-quality magazine, it also allows you to invest in independent journalism and join us in shaping the future of news. Now, this most recent issue focuses on the 29 biggest elections of the year, making sure you understand what really happened in this mega election year and commemorating one of the biggest years in news. We don't just discuss elections, though. We also run through China's trade issues, Biden's successes and failures, and the UK's new opposition leader, and the state of the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Plus, the fact it's a magazine also means we're not constrained by the time limits or algorithms imposed by YouTube. Unlike fleeting news cycles and algorithmic feeds, Too Long offers thought-provoking analysis and comprehensive coverage that's truly worth holding. If you're convinced, you have 3 more decisions to make. First, do you want a physical or digital copy? The physical is a high-quality 60-page perfect-bound magazine shipped right to your door. The digital is slightly cheaper, especially if shipping is a concern. Your second choice is the standard or premium edition. The standard is just a copy of the magazine, while premium also gets you access to our monthly behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, where we break down all of the production of Too Long and TLDR more generally, and you'll get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Finally, do you want to subscribe? If you do, you'll get a copy of Too Long every 4 months, meaning you'll never miss an issue. Plus, you'll also get 25% off every copy as long as you stay subscribed. If you can, subscribing also gives us a reliable income stream, which is super useful for us. Regardless of which option you choose, you can buy a copy right now at toolong.news or click the link in the description. Thanks for your support, and thanks for backing Too Long.